Hey everyone, so decided to bring back the walk and talk format for 2025 a little bit. It's something I kind of experimented with and then didn't really do much with in 2024. So the main thing I want to talk about is how my training goals and my perspective has changed. I think that last year I made great progress in a general sense. I felt like I entered 2025 pretty generally fit, with a few weak points that I wanted to focus on, and so that's one thing where I've become interested in a few goals, mainly obtaining a back bridge, the handstand push-up, which I am close to but not quite there with, mastering the muscle up and other ballistic movements like the kip up, the explosive jump, and then improving mobility and just continuing with my cardio training. I know that sounds like a lot, and so that is one reason that I've had to change a lot of my training objectives, because I've had to focus on things that are either very specialized and easy to recover from, or have such a high level of general carryover that I can use them as many different things. Example A being this rucking, which is both leg training and cardio at the same time. And so it's very helpful for building strong legs with good endurance and maintaining some leg muscle mass, since I am doing a lot less leg training. Things I had to cut out: I decided to cut out Olympic weightlifting. I never actually bothered to film much of my Olympic weightlifting, not out of embarrassment, but just because I was so close to just a novice that I felt that I couldn't really give any sort of feedback or information that would be that helpful to somebody watching. So while it might have been useful for my own purposes, posting it online wouldn't have been that great, because I didn't want somebody to watch me and see that, oh, he's decent at other things, maybe this atrocious Olympic lifting form is the way I should be doing it. Not true. There's a lot of great Olympic lifting resources, and I am not one of them. And I think it's good to acknowledge your limitations and not spread bad information on the internet. I enjoyed Olympic lifting greatly. I did a little stint of it when I was first training, back when I was like 15, 16-ish. I really liked it. But while Olympic weightlifting is a great way to exercise, but it is a very high skill form of exercise, and I think it's a type of strength training that really requires a lot of commitment. That means minimum 3-4 days a week of doing pretty specialized Olympic weightlifting focused training. And I was just finding that it was difficult to both be a calisthenics athlete, which is my first love, and has very technically complex movements involved, and then also trying to be an Olympic weightlifting athlete, which was really always a secondary objective. So I loved doing it, but the only way that I could really progress at both is if I neglected everything else, which is what I did when I was 16. I basically just Olympic weightlifted and just did calisthenics. And the calisthenics back then were honestly pretty rudimentary. It was mostly like weighted chin-ups, things like that. So I honestly think that I was mainly an Olympic weightlifter who did some calisthenics training. And so I was specialized enough that I could make significant progress at that. But I was just finding that from a nervous system perspective, I think it was just too many skills for my body to be acquiring. It was a lot of load on my lower back and legs, and a lot of just fatigue from front squatting all the time. And so I had to put it aside because it wasn't my absolute priority. And what I found is that by doing that, it's allowed me to fit other things into that time slot. So rucking, which I had begun to do a little bit of, but I had completely put to the side because it was simply too much leg exertion, I was able to bring back into the picture. And what I love about rucking is the convenience factor, where I can take this to these locations that I'm training calisthenics at. A lot of these are outdoor places with trails or tracks, something like that. I can walk around for 20 minutes. I could honestly, if I really wanted to, intersperse workouts where I'm rucking and doing calisthenics. I don't personally want to do that, but it is an option. Will rucking build as much leg strength and muscle mass as would Olympic weightlifting? Absolutely not. There's just no comparison. It's apples to oranges. Will rucking do a lot more than me just doing calisthenics and not prioritizing any sort of leg training? Absolutely. So really, I look at rucking as this is a stopgap where I can maintain enough leg strength that I can focus on other aspects of my athletic development that I need to focus on. For example, I need to be doing more calisthenics leg movements and more mobility movements. I actually recently worked with a yoga instructor that's very knowledgeable, and she was able to identify a lot of imbalances and weaknesses from the left to the right in terms of mobility, in terms of stability, and just in terms of coordination. There's huge disparities from left to right, and that's not something that Olympic weightlifting is going to directly address, whereas calisthenics leg training will. However, just doing calisthenics leg training with a focus on mobility and stability is not going to be enough to really maintain lower body strength, especially the kind of axial loading that you need to carry over to lifting weights. It's not that I'm not lifting weights entirely. I'm still doing some bodybuilding stuff and some kettlebells, but it is definitely not a super high priority. But I find that with rucking, I have enough leg strength that really I can go into the gym and not tweak my low back. And that's one of the reasons that I do not recommend just doing calisthenics alone, because the loading pattern of the weights is pretty specific. I don't think you necessarily need barbells. I don't think you need to do a ton of weighted movements, but you should never do absolutely no weighted movements if you want to just be generally strong. Besides that, another thing I've been incorporating is I've been swimming a lot, and I haven't been filming that because I don't want my phone camera to get super wet. I started out about 2 days a week, just focusing on technique, and now I tend to do 3 to 4. And what I love about swimming is I've found that it is the most conducive to calisthenics training form of cardio that I have ever found. So while rucking is great, it's an awesome generalist movement, it's great for keeping my lower body strength in check and making sure that I can actually handle weighted movements on the occasions that I do them, which is like once or twice a week. It's not actually that high of a carryover to calisthenics. It's just a very different kind of thing. But with swimming, what I found is that a ton of the athletic attributes that you need for calisthenics and a ton of the athletic attributes that you develop while swimming carry over really, really well. So, I mean, the first thing is obviously you get tremendous endurance and work capacity in your upper body and your core. And that is like obviously going to have a massive amount of carryover to calisthenics. One thing I like in particular about swimming is that you get a huge amount of back training, as in like your lats, your mid back, your shoulders, a lot of this pulling musculature that is very hard to find pulling movements when it comes to cardio training. My upper body endurance and my core endurance is just better than it probably ever has been, including when I was doing burpees. I actually, made a video recently about how many reps I can do. And while I wasn't doing any specific muscular endurance work, like really high rep work for these calisthenics movements, absolutely the conditioning I acquired from swimming helped me to do over 100 push-ups, do 75 plus rows, and really be able to walk it off a few days later. A few other things I like about swimming is that it attacks a lot of areas that calisthenics does not actually do a great job of addressing. So you have to think about with swimming, you are always under resistance. Like no matter what angle you're moving at, you're always moving through some form of resistance. So there's a lot of lateral movement. There's movement in basically all planes simultaneously. And so you're just hitting a lot of areas that aren't usually able to be hit easily within calisthenics. A few other things, body composition wise, I'm at the best I've been in a long time. I am like leaner with a good amount of muscle mass, particularly in my upper body. And I can't really think of a time where I wasn't like dieting meticulously that I was even close to this lean. I don't quite have like six-pack abs, but I mean, I'm like 208 to 210, lean, mean, fighting machine. So that is awesome because I haven't really had to change much. It's just the product of the swimming, basically. Other things it's done, some of the areas it develops are the triceps and the chest musculature have gotten so much stronger. So triceps, I've always genetically had great triceps. I always had good insertions. It takes very little for me to get them to grow. But calisthenics generally is more favoring of the arm flexors. There's just more development that you get. And so when you're mainly doing calisthenics, unless you're doing a lot of triceps isolation work, you're going to have them lag behind in terms of muscle and a bit in terms of strength. But that's really important for any pressing movement. And so the triceps being brought up by swimming has been really fantastic. And I find that my triceps are very fast twitch. They do tend to get fatigued really quickly, and that is often the limiting factor in pressing work. The chest, I've always had as a weak point, and I found that swimming has kind of indicated to me that I have a relatively slow twitch chest relative to most people, where I really don't start to feel it until I get to the end of these workouts. Like a few 100 meters in, I'm getting a huge chest pump. Basically, my triceps and shoulders tend to take over in almost all of these movements. And so developing the chest for me has been pretty massive in terms of improving my calisthenics ability, because I think that was my glaring weakness. Besides the general cardio, it's very low impact, so you can sneak it into basically any workout. I'm actually able to swim laps before I do strength training a lot of the time, and as long as I'm making sure I get sufficient electrolytes, I've found that I can easily go and do a workout. Like, obviously, like, make sure that you've got some intra-workout calories and electrolytes, otherwise you will get horrific ab cramps. Besides that, the mobility improvements in swimming have been astronomical. It's so light on my tissues, and my shoulder mobility, my upper back mobility, even the mobility in my hips and hamstrings has improved a lot. It has not improved everywhere, but it does improve a lot of the areas you need for calisthenics. I've been surprised, for example, that my hamstrings have improved dramatically to the point where I can do a few toes to bar hanging leg raises without really a lot of effort. And that's entirely a mobility increase. It was never a strength factor for me. It was always just I wasn't mobile enough to do that. My overhead shoulder mobility has improved a lot. My chest mobility, rotational has done well. There are a few still weak points I need to address in my hips and ankles and knees in particular, because swimming doesn't do very much for that other than a little bit when you get from breaststroke. But again, I can't recommend it enough. If you just want cardio that carries over to calisthenics, if you don't like doing high rep work but you want to be able to do high reps, if you want to do something that decompresses you from lifting weights, swimming is pretty fantastic. While my goals are pretty lofty this time around, I actually have been trying to focus on doing less but better in terms of my training. So I've been doing more calisthenics, and while it's been varied calisthenics, I am now doing calisthenics about 4 days a week consistently, which is kind of a step up. The other thing I've been doing is a lot of more cardio, just in general, a lot of rucking, a lot of swimming, because it's just always good to build work capacity. And really, I'm very focused on staying lean. I'm not dieting down for any specific reason, other than I just need to stay light, because really anything to do with calisthenics, this 5 to 10 pound difference has been pretty dramatic. One of the other reasons I've made adjustments, besides preferences and kind of changes of what interests me, is that I have had an increasingly busy schedule. I'm very time constrained, and so I've had to figure out what the most time efficient means of training are. So I've basically kind of done more of a split type thing, where I tend to do just enough on any given day, but not so much that I fatigue myself. I've been doing 2 a days some days, because it would either be one really long, really fatiguing workout where I would just kind of trash myself and whatever I did at the end would be bad, or I can do something in the morning before work, school, whatever, and then I can do something late at night to kind of wind down, and I have 6 to 12 hours in between to eat, rehydrate, do whatever else I need to do. Workout timing has become extremely important, as well as managing frequency and volume, because the intensity is something I'm always going to bring. So really, I need to just dial back on the other stuff. This is another reason I like swimming and rucking, because they're both things that you can fit into your life very easily. I'm actually a big fan of cycling. I love biking, but it is not a time-efficient option for people who can't commute via bicycle. And I happen to have a lot of situations where I'm getting up very early in the morning, begrudgingly. So it's very dark out, it's very cold, and I would just get hit by a car if I tried to do that. Rather than trying to kind of force that situation to happen, I've instead been just readjusting. And so far, it's been working pretty well. Like, I think I'm not going to make as much general progress as I was going to last year when I had less on my plate, because I made fantastic gains in a lot of different areas. Achieving the muscle up was a landmark moment for me, amongst other things. But I know that I just don't have as much recovery capacity, time, or even mental energy to spare. And so I need to make my workouts a lot more predictable and a lot more routine. So what I like with rucking is I can do 20 to 40 minutes, get a really great workout in. I oftentimes actually ruck with this stuff to wherever I'm going to do calisthenics, and then back when I'm doing a shorter ruck. So that's a win-win. And with swimming, you could technically go swim laps for hours if you wanted to, but realistically, the most efficient way in terms of developing swimming ability, and the most efficient way in terms of like time and energy spent, is that you train in an interval fashion. So I tend to do 50 to 200 meter intervals, basically, where I'm going nonstop at a pretty good clip. I stop, I catch my breath, I check the clock for 20 to 60 seconds, and then I go again. I'm doing about 800, 900 meters on my long days, and I'm able to do that at a decent pace, because even though I'm not a super experienced swimmer, I'm stopping enough that I can stay fresh and can maintain my technique. The other thing I want to say about rucking, you may notice I have a new backpack. I was using a weight vest for rucking, and while I think that's a good, very early on intro to rucking, I knew I needed to upgrade my equipment if I was going to be serious about this. And so what I did is I got the kettlebell rucking backpack from Well Built Kettlebells. And so it is a rucking backpack specifically designed to carry kettlebells in it, because I have kettlebells of various weights. And so I just load the kettlebell into the backpack. It's a win-win, because I can carry a kettlebell without wearing out my grip. So I can carry a kettlebell for miles if I needed to go wherever I'm going to go work out. And I can kind of load in increments. So I've just found that switching from a weight vest to rucking backpack, it's so much more comfortable immediately. And so if you're going to be doing serious rucking, you need to really, anything beyond 20 pounds, it starts just being really uncomfortable using a weight vest. There's a lot of pressure on your chest. It's just not optimally designed for that purpose. But again, it is good if you're not sure. I would suggest that you try out with a weight vest first, just to make sure, because if you really hate the whole way your legs feel and you find rucking to be tedious and boring, then you're not going to like it any better if you get better equipment. But I recommend really only using the weight vest for an absolute rudimentary test run, and then upgrading to decent rucking gear, because I found that I could immediately use 10 more pounds of weight without any additional discomfort, and that these backpacks are also well designed so that they distribute the weight in a different way, so there's less load on my upper back compared to when I just had the weight vest pushing directly down on my spinal column. There's a lot less load on your upper back. It's shifted more towards your low back and a lot towards your hips and legs, so that your lower body, the really strong muscles of your glutes and your quads and hamstrings, can take over a lot more of the work, which is really what you're trying to do anyways. You're still going to get enough core endurance training for it to be worth your while, but you don't want it to just be that your core is the limiting factor when it comes to rucking, because really it should be how far your legs can carry you and how much load they can carry. And don't worry, your upper back still will be sore after this. That's about it as far as the training goes.